herzlich willkommen bei whisky.de, dem Treffpunkt feiner Geister. Und heute bin ich in der Stadt Ellon, ja, an der Ostseite von Schottland. Und hier gibt es eine Firma, die heißt BrewDog. Eigentlich sind sie ja bekannt für ihr Bier, meist Craft-Biere, obwohl sie mittlerweile schon sehr, sehr groß sind. Sie haben verschiedene Brauereien in Amerika, in Berlin, in Australien und eben auch hier. Und hier haben sie jetzt angefangen, auch Whisky herzustellen. Und heute schauen wir uns mal an, was kann so eine Brauerei? Können die dann auch mit ihrer sehr, sehr ausgefeilten Technik der Fermentation und Maischen, können die da auch einen guten Whisky herstellen? Wer an Craft-Bier denkt, denkt erstmal an klein und ja, hemdsärmelig und nicht professionell. Stimmt aber nicht. Craft-Bier ist mittlerweile eine Kategorie für sich selbst. Und hier auch dieser Whisky wird bei BrewDog sehr, sehr stark analysiert. Man kann das Wash, also nach der Fermentation, analysieren. Man kann aber auch den New Make Spirit analysieren. Es wird gemacht durch einen Gaschromatograph. Das ist, man beschleunigt sein Sample, also sein Element, und lenkt es dann ab durch eine gewisse Ablenkungsquelle, die das Ganze dann, desto schwerer, desto stärker wird es abgelenkt, und so bekommt man ein Spektrum an Teilen, wie viel etwas enthält. Und darüber kann man dann sagen, okay, ich habe dieses Element und das schmeckt nach so und so. Ich habe dieses Element, das schmeckt nach so und so. Und so kann man dann sagen, okay, was habe ich für Elemente drin, wie schmecken die und was hat das für eine Auswirkung auf meinen Whisky insgesamt oder Bier. Und das Tolle an diesem Gerät ist, das analysiert nicht nur, das kann man auch noch, wenn man sagt, ich habe eine Probe analysiert, also ich kann mehrere Proben analysieren, dann sagt man, ich würde gerne mal die Probe riechen, dann geht man hier hin und der gibt einem die Probe zurück und dann sagt, okay, sieht so aus, da ist das drin, so schmeckt's. Und so kann man extrem schön Experimente machen und die dann auch noch nachvollziehen und dann logisch vervollständigen und verbessern. Die Herstellung beginnt natürlich mit dem Malz. Und hier hat die BrewDog Distillery, auch BrewDog Brewery, einen großen Vorteil, weil sie mit ihrem ganzen Craft-Bier und ihrem ganzen Innovationsgeist natürlich sehr, sehr viel auf Zutaten legen. Sie haben draußen große Silos mit Pale Malt, also Standardmalz mit 40 Tonnen Volumen, die man einfach durch den Conveyor Belt, also durch das Fließband reinbringt. Und dann gibt es hier noch verschiedene andere Malzsorten in 1 Tonnen Säcken, wo man dazu mischen kann, und auch noch viele kleine 25 Kilo Säcke, wo man wirklich einfach noch kleinere Geschmackserlebnisse mit reinmachen kann. Also sie haben extrem viele verschiedene Malzsorten. Da ist Chocolate Malt drunter, da ist ein Roasted Malt drunter. Also das sind so die Stout-Malze. Also wer so ein bisschen dieses Süße vom Stout kennt, der kann sich hier auch wiederfinden. Und da kann man einfach noch ein paar Geschmacksnuancen dazugeben. Wir haben ja schon gesagt, der Standard-Whisky wird ein normales Pale Malt, aber es wird eine ganze Menge verschiedene Innovationen und Experimente geben. Der Prozess des Maischen und des Läuterns ist natürlich in der Brauerei mit einer größeren Lupe betrachtet, als das in einer Whisky-Brennerei ist. Also sie haben sich da natürlich viel, viel mehr Gedanken gemacht und es gibt natürlich viel, viel mehr Schritte, wo noch verschiedene Hopfen und solche Sachen reinkommen. Aber darum soll es nicht gehen. Mashing wird hinter mir in der Mash-Tun gemacht. Dort wird das Wasser, also der Grist und das Wasser vermischt, also der Schrot und das Wasser. Und man fängt so ungefähr mit 55 an. Wenn man nur Gerste hat, macht man ein bisschen höher. Also es hängt ein bisschen vom Rezept ab, mit welcher Temperatur man anfängt. Durchmischt das Ganze und mischt kontinuierlich und erhöht dann kontinuierlich die Temperatur. Das ist so das Verfahren mit dem besten Output. Außenrum hat man einen Mantel an Dampf, mit dem man das Ganze dann regulieren kann, wie viel Energie man einträgt. Das Läutern, also das Abziehen des Wassers, wird dann hier in dieser großen Laudertann gemacht. Das ist sehr ähnlich zu dem, wie man es von der Whiskybrennereien, von den neueren Laudertanns kennt, mit False Floor, also mit falschem Boden, mit Filter, und da wird dann das Ganze abgefiltert und vom Treber getrennt. Sie wollten auch mal noch einen Rye Whisky machen, aber da hatten sie eine schlechte Erfahrung gemacht, denn die Spezialisten unter euch wissen es vielleicht, Rye Whisky hat eine andere Zusammensetzung als Gerste. Und wenn man einen Rye Whisky masht, dann kann es passieren, dass, wenn man ihn normal wie beim Single Malt masht, dann passiert es so, dass dort sich Stoffe freisetzen, die sehr ähnlich zu einem Kleber sind. Und in einer Lautertann braucht man immer ein Huskbed, also ein Spelzebett. Ich weiß nicht, ob es im Englischen so richtig ist. Und das ist sehr fluffig und alles kann da durchsickern und alles geht unten durch durch das Sieb durch und man hat schön sein Wort. Beim Rye ist es dann so, da bildet sich dann eine teigige Masse, die kein Wasser mehr durchlässt und alles ist blockiert und das steht dann dafür Tage und Wochen drin, bis es dann alles langsam absickern würde. Also es funktioniert nicht. Was man also macht ist, man hat den Mashing-Prozess separat, also man hat hier eine ganz normal, wie drüben auch, eine Mash-Tann und da macht man das Ganze, das ist dann eben etwas kleberiger, die ganze Geschichte, und man braucht dann am Ende einen Mash-Filter, wie er auch in der Bierproduktion oder in der großen Grain-Produktion eingesetzt wird. Und da kann man ihn dann durchjagen und in dem Filter bleibt dann alles hängen. Man kann durch höheren Druck das Ganze sehr schön die festen Bestandteile von den flüssigen Bestandteilen trennen. Man hat am Ende dann sein schönes Rye Wort. Die Fermentation bei BrewDog ist natürlich auch wieder etwas anders. Das Interessante hier ist, dass sie keine Lactobakterien drin haben wollen, die dann eben die Milchsäurebakterien sind es, die dann Milchsäure produzieren, was das Ganze sauer macht. Deswegen, nachdem sie die festen und die flüssigen Bestandteile getrennt haben, wird der flüssige Wort nochmal richtig heiß gemacht. Also sie machen das wirklich auf 100 Grad heiß und sterilisieren damit ihr Wort. Und das ist dann schön, weil man dann eben keine Lactobakterien drin hat und das Ganze nicht sauer wird. Also sie wollen einen sehr, sehr sauberen Prozess, um dann nur die Geschmäcker der Hefe reinzubringen. Also sie nutzen so ein Belgian Ale zurzeit für ihren Standard und das kann dann richtig schöne Geschmäcker produzieren. Sie machen jetzt aber dann bald, werden sie eine große Hefeprobe machen, wo sie sagen, wir benutzen jetzt ganz viele verschiedene Hefen, probieren die alle aus und gucken mal, was da für Geschmäcker rauskommen und welche uns dann in Zukunft noch gefallen werden. Der Standardprozess wird dann hier in 2x 80.000 Liter Tanks bei 100 Stunden passieren und innen drin haben sie noch mehrere kleine Tanks mit 15.000 Litern Volumen. Das ist dann eben für diese Experimente, um dann herauszufinden, welche Hefe ist am besonders besten. Das Brennhaus der BrewDogs musste gerade umziehen. Es war vorher in der normalen Fabrik und hat es ein eigenes Haus bekommen. Und es ist wirklich unglaublich, was hier drin ist. Wir haben 3 große Whisky Stills und wir haben eine riesige Säulendestillation für den Wodka, dann noch eine Säulendestillation, um den Methanol vom Wodka rauszuholen. Dann haben wir noch eine größere Gin Still, noch eine kleine Experimental Gin Still. Ja, aber darum soll es jetzt mal nicht gehen. Jetzt gehen wir erstmal auf den Whisky ein. Als erstes haben wir die 10.000 Liter Wash Still mit 3 großen Reflux Bowls. Und die ist einfach, um den ganz normal 24% aus dem Wash raus zu destillieren. Wobei sie sagen, sie könnten sie auch mal ein Stückchen langsamer laufen lassen, um auch mal den Wash ein bisschen zu betrachten. Und sie haben sehr, sehr viel Reflux da drin. Also ist es auch sehr, sehr interessant, was vielleicht mal bei den niedrigeren Prozentzahlen, ob da Einflüsse rauskommen. Tendenziell sind aber die Einflüsse bei den niedrigeren Prozentzahlen viel niedriger. Dann haben sie noch so eine Still, kleiner, 3000 Liter als Spirit Still mit Reflux Bowls. Auch wieder sehr, sehr viel Kupferkontakt, denn was sie für ihren Standard anpeilen, ist ein tropisch fruchtiger, leichter Whisky. Also deswegen sehr, sehr, sehr viel Kupferkontakt. Sie könnten auch noch einen Rectifier anstellen, also dass das Ganze nochmal den Reflux noch stark erhöht. Und dann geht es natürlich normal durch den Kondensator und wird kondensiert. Sie streben eine doppelte Destillation an, also Ihr Standard wird eine doppelte Destillation, können natürlich aber auch eine dreifache Destillation machen. Die letzte Still ist ein bisschen den schottischen nachempfunden mit Einschnürung und Lampen. Lampenform, hat auch nochmal einen Rectifier, könnte man auch nochmal den Reflux stark erhöhen. Und das ist das, was Sie hier wollen. Also Sie wollen 90% Standard machen, aber bei den 10% Innovation werden Sie in eine ganz, ganz viele Richtungen gehen. Das erste, was Sie jetzt in die Richtung gehen, Sie wollen jetzt erstmal noch mal einmal ganz groß schauen, was passiert alles bei der Hefe. Aber in Zukunft wollen Sie dann auch noch mal stark mit den Destillationen variieren und mal gucken, was da noch so rauszuholen ist. Also ein so großes Brennhaus mit so vielen verschiedenen Stills, muss ich ehrlich gestehen, habe ich noch nie gesehen. So viele Stills in einem Raum ist schon sehr, sehr besonders. Ihr kennt mittlerweile ja schon so ein bisschen die Philosophie von BrewDog. Sie heißt ausprobieren in alle Richtungen. Und deswegen haben sie sich hier auf diesem Gelände noch ein Warehouse gebaut. Ein Lagerhaus mit sehr besonderer Einrichtung. Und zwar haben sie sich eine heftige Klimaanlage einbauen lassen. Jetzt nicht nur eine Klimaanlage, wie man es im Büro kennt, nur kühlen, sondern die kann kühlen, heizen und auch noch die Luftfeuchtigkeit einstellen. Also können Sie hier sehr, sehr, sehr viele Klimazonen des Planeten nachstellen. Also Sie könnten auch sagen 80% Luftfeuchtigkeit, extrem warm oder Luftfeuchtigkeit hoch, relativ kühl. Also Sie können hier sehr, sehr, sehr viel einstellen und das hört man alle paar Minuten oder alle, weiß nicht wie lange das ist, aber da kommt dann irgendwann so ein bisschen so Nebel runter und die Luftfeuchtigkeit wird gerade zur Zeit ein wenig angehoben. Mit der Auswahl der Fässer habe ich sie gefragt, okay, wahrscheinlich sehr, sehr viel Auswahl. Ich habe auch schon sehr, sehr viel gefunden hier und extrem viele verschiedene Fässer, aber ihr Standard wird so sein, 25% Ex-Bourbon und dann eine Mischung aus Sherry- und Portweinfässern, wobei sie da sagen so, Madeira, Tawny Port, also da wird schon eine ganze Menge verschiedener Sachen drin sein. Also klingt nach einem sehr komplexen Whisky in ihrer Standardabfüllung. Zu den Experimenten ist, ich habe mir ein bisschen mal erklären lassen, was hier so passiert. Was sie ein sehr interessantes Experiment gemacht haben, ist, sie haben ein frisches Fass genommen. Und frische Fässer sind sehr interessant, aber auch ein Stückchen zu einnehmen. Man hat sehr, sehr viele Tannine drin und kann es einfach mal zur Überreifung kommen. Aber wenn man irgendwas Vorgängermäßiges drin hat, nimmt man natürlich den Geschmack davon an. Also hat man sich überlegt, okay, was machen wir? Wir nehmen einfach mal unseren Wodka und füllen ihn in so ein frisches Fass ein, weil der Wodka ist per Definition, hat er keinen Geschmack und ziehen dadurch erstmal ein bisschen die heftigen Geschmäcker raus, haben sie zurück in die Redestillation gegeben, wieder etwas Geschmackloses draus gemacht und dann hatten sie ein etwas ausgelaugtes Fass, was aber nicht durch irgendwelche Geschmäcker verunreinigt wurde. Sehr, sehr interessantes Experiment, würde ich auch gerne mal probieren. Sie haben es gemacht mit amerikanischer Eiche, wäre natürlich auch mal mit europäischer Eiche sehr interessant, weil über europäische Eiche, wenn man die in Virgin nimmt, also in frisch nimmt, die wird immer zu krass. Ja, also hier auf On-Site wieder schön mit allen Experimenten. Gibt auch noch ein paar Lagerhäuser, die dann nicht hier sind und da wird dann der normale Whisky gelagert im normalen schottischen Klima. Gut, ich weiß nicht, ich glaube, ich werde hier noch keinen Whisky kriegen. Wir werden mal schauen, was es jetzt an Tasting noch so alles geben wird. Ja, das war's mit der Produktion und jetzt geht's weiter mit einem kleinen Tasting von ein paar Zwischenprodukten. So this was it, and now we're having a little tasting with Master Distiller Stephen Kersley.
Hi.
You've been 16 years in the business.
Yes.
In the whiskey business, and you're now Master Distiller, and already, what was it, 8 years? No.
8.
8 years here at the distillery, and you've already set it up. Mm-hmm. So first of all, thank you very much for having us here.
Very welcome. Thank you for coming.
Yeah, but I have tons of questions. So how was the setting up of that distillery? I mean, that is just such a interesting place.
So we set out with a very clear mission, which was to create a design for a distillery which was capable of distilling any styles of whiskey and any styles of spirit that we wanted. So from single malt Scotch whiskey to single grain Scotch whiskey to rum, to vodka, to gin. We really wanted to just be able to create a distillery where we could have no limitations.
Okay, yeah, that is cool, and I don't see any limitations yet.
No, we've got so many levers and tunes that we could play on creating flavor. It's great.
Okay, so and also we have something from clear to brown. So what are you having today?
So we're going to start off with 2 new makes. Okay. These have been distilled in the last 3 months. This is our latest single malt recipe. And this is our latest single grain, which is very rye forward in terms of the grain bill. Let's start with the single malt. Okay. So this is 100% malt barley, as you would expect. And the key with this new make spirit is that the yeast that we've used during the fermentation is a Belgian ale strain from the Le Trappe brewery in Belgium. So the kind of Belgian ale style produces a lot of phenolic compounds, a lot of long chain fruity esters, and we really wanted to concentrate them in the new make to understand how they were going to impact the flavour of the whiskey during its maturation. So taking this to the nose, this is 63.5%, which is where we're
barreling strength or casking strength. Still in Scotland. Oh, I love it. It's very, very fresh.
Super fresh. Lots of stone fruits, like dark fruits. Things like for me, I get a lot of the kind of apricots, peaches, and then there's a backbone of maltiness, malty biscuity aroma, grain. That's super important, because what we want to try and do is give the grain a platform to give its own flavour to the overall flavour profile.
It's the pale malt.
Exactly. Yes.
Oh, okay. Nice. What I find interesting is that the thing that you're doing the brewing process with the sterilizing and just the yeast, no lactic acid.
Yep.
I don't know if I'm just imagining it, but it feels like you have less of that pear and citrus character and more, as you said, stony fruit character.
Yeah, and that's coming from the yeast. And the reason for that is the yeast is not having to compete with anything. So when you've got lactobacillus and yeast, they will compete towards the end of the fermentation. And of course, a lot of distillers will say that the late lactic fermentation is really important because it gives you the full attenuation, which is the full consumption of all the sugars and turning them into alcohol. We don't get that. So interestingly for us, our fermentations stick a little bit towards the end, and we don't extract all of the sugar from the fermentation.
Really?
We don't. But for me, that's a compromise that we make, because flavour for us is the most important thing.
But you're still coming out with 9%. I've seen 8.5.
Yep.
So
we're running just over standard gravity of 1, so it's like 1.02.
Okay.
We don't drop under.
That is cool.
And yeah, we've got this currently maturing in the warehouse.
I'm going to try it.
Go for it. In ex-bourbon and also ex-Oloroso sherry.
It's different fruity than most of the spirits that I've tried yet, but it has a good amount of sweetness.
It's also, for 63.5%, it coats your palate.
Yeah.
It's got an oiliness, a viscosity. It doesn't immediately lift off and blow your head off, which is really important. I mean, obviously, your nose is your most important asset when you're appraising a whiskey, but flavour, once you get past your nose, how does it feel in your palate? How does it feel on your tongue? How does it feel in your mouth? That's what's really key. So we've got a real nice oiliness that sits with a heaviness on the palate, and that's
also
maltiness
and the marzipan note.
Yeah,
it's strange. It's a very versatile new make. Very well done. Yeah. But I've seen all your equipment. I wonder how many new makes you had to nose and taste.
Yeah, and we're just about to start a new, as I mentioned, we're going to start a little bit of a new exploration into yeast. So we're going to be combining different strains of yeast in the next few weeks to understand, if you take a rum yeast and a whiskey, traditional whiskey yeast, what does that do? We've got red wine We've got lots of different iterations, and we're working with some of the best yeast experts in the industry to help navigate us through this as well. So we believe that great whiskey starts at fermentation. It can be definitely enhanced during maturation and the distillation process, but if you don't have a great fermentation, the quality will not be where you want it to be.
Yeah, I think if you're attached to a brewery, then yeah, fermentation is taken a lot more seriously.
Very seriously, yeah. So that's our single malt. We'll move on to our single rye, our single grain. So this is just under 70%, 69% rye, which is incredible. We, as you know, previously used to try and lauter our rye mashes, and I think I'll be honest and say it was challenging, right? And the reason it was so challenging is because rye just does not lauter well. The beta glucans, the kind of gluey components that exist within the rye grain, they stick to the bottom of that that lauter tun, and you just cannot drain, and you cannot get your wort to run off at a good speed. So it took 14 hours the last time to complete the mash, which was crazy.
Oh yeah.
So this is 70%, and the reason it's 70% is because it's been processed in our mash filter, which is a much more effective system to extract or utilize high rye concentrations in your grain bill. And you can go and have a look at how a mash filter works, but what you'll find is it seamlessly processes those more challenging grains. So this is a little bit of malt barley, just over 10%. Majority is rye, which is just under 70, and then we've got some malted wheat as well.
Okay.
There.
Is it also casking strength?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Yeah, it's definitely, you feel tons of different. I mean, it's a rye new make spirit. I have to say I haven't had that many rye new makes in my glass yet. I think one or two.
The palate though will surprise you. So the nose for me, the nose is quite subtle. There's a bit of spice, there's a bit of fruitiness, but then when it gets onto the palate, it's just it really just explodes in flavour. And then if you breathe out after a sip of this through your nose, you get a lot of stuff going on retronasally, which is really really interesting.
Yeah, it has a lot of volume, has a lot of spices in there, I would say. It doesn't have that forward fruitiness, fresh, and all of that you have in a normal single malt, I would say. Yeah. No, I like that.
We love this. So again, this is double pot distilled rye. Okay, so it's a really important distinction to make between how this is distilled in other Scotch whisky or other Scotch grain whiskies. Okay, Scotch grain whiskey is usually taken up to just over 93% ABV, and that's done through a column still.
So wait, you have rye grain, not malted?
Rye, everything's malted in this.
Okay,
however,
rye malt plus barley malt
plus wheat malt.
Plus wheat malt.
So everything's malt.
And just normal through the process, and then pot stilled.
Pot stilled.
Are you allowed to call it single malt, or what are you allowed to call it?
It has to be grain.
It has to be grain.
Yeah. So single grain, but pot distilled. So what's great about this is I love single grain whiskey.
But still, there's all malt in there.
Yeah.
That should be a new something.
Potentially. But by definition, it's malt barley, right?
Yeah.
So, but what's so cool about this is, and I love single grain, but when you taste a single grain, because of the way they're distilled, they're typically quite muted. Subtle flavors is probably what I would associate with grain.
A bit flatter, I would say, as the malt.
Yeah, approachable. If you're not someone who's maybe too ordained with drinking whiskey, something like a grain is a great gateway whiskey into the world of Scotch whiskey. But for this, what we've done is we've used 2 pot stills to create it. So it's not been rectified to a high ABV. It's only been distilled to 74%, not like most of the grains, which are upwards of
But I think
93.
this is a lot different to grain. This I wouldn't think. Yeah, it has maybe something with a rye whiskey that you'd know from, I don't know, America or something.
Yeah.
But it's still crazy.
Cool.
Nice.
So let's get into some of the older stuff. What we have here is a 4-year-old that's in ex-bourbon, single malt. And how this has been distilled is fairly traditionally. We used Maris Otter barley to make this one. So 100% Maris Otter barley, malted, distilled using a mixture of red wine yeast and traditional M strain, which is just the kind of typical yeast that you would use in the Scotch whisky industry.
What, you used 2 yeasts?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Did you ferment them separately or?
No, we added a little bit of the red wine yeast first, and then we added the single malt the whiskey yeast. So this is just over 4 years old. It's got a few years left to go. There's a lot of fruitiness from the red wine yeast, as you would expect.
It has a strange fruitiness in there. It's kind of a fresh fruitiness, but
fresh is good.
Sour fruitiness, but not as in sour. That it feels really sour, but
it's like there's a bit of cherry. I find like cherry wood.
I would have said rhubarb, but not as a fresh rhubarb, not one of the really sweet rhubarbs, but one of the more fresher ones.
Rhubarb's a good call, actually. I know you kind of, it's all subjective, but yeah, rhubarb.
It is all subjective.
So this is a really fruit-forward whiskey. What this will go into later on is this will go into sherry, egg-sherry.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll re-rack this into sherry, but because that's the style of whiskey that we will be known for. But this is a great foundation to then layer more flavour on top of. So what yours?
4-year-old whiskey, so it's nice. So
cask strength as well. So
started off just sweet, and then it changed a lot.
Yeah.
But it has something, a little bit of a red wine touch to it. Then a bit of a sour, fruity touch to it. It's nice. And this is just a ex-bourbon.
Just ex-bourbon. So,
but I think you played a lot with the yeast, though.
So, but this is the point. Right? This is the point for me. It's like this whole industry is never really understood the value of what yeast can bring to the flavour profile, right? And for me, I said to you earlier on, when you're distilling, right, and this is going to probably downplay our skill sets as distillers, we're only heating things up. That's all we're doing, right? Like, we just heat things up and we cool them down, okay?
Okay.
But what you're doing in that process is during the distillation, you're concentrating all the flavours that you've made from the previous steps, from your milling process, your mashing process, your fermentation process. So when you go in to distill, you can only distill the flavours that you've created. So it stands to reason then, if you have been very careful about the flavours that you're creating, then you can create different flavours depending on the ingredients you use. Yeah. A lot of people would say the distillery character is a big part of what creates the flavour profile, and that is arguably true. But for us, our distillery character will be the fact that we use our sherry casks and port wine casks at the end of the process, but all the way in the run up to that, you're changing little things to optimize the flavor profile. And we will have, of course, a whiskey that is in our core range for a single malt, which will be, what people can come back to and expect the same experience every time. But then, as I said to you, we've got about 10% of our warehouse, which is just, okay, well, if we change that, what happens to the flavour? If we do this, what happens to the flavour? What if we turn that dial? What does that do to the flavour? That's where we will learn a lot, and hopefully we will excite whiskey drinkers by giving them, new expressions based on little changes that we've made to the process that they know really well, but maybe haven't thought about that process in that way before because they've not been challenged.
Yeah, it's great. With this distillery, you don't have really like a tradition that hinders you to move on.
No.
Yeah, that is the thing. And what interests me is you kind of got into the brewing, and there was no distillery. You set up a distillery where there was brewing. How was that? Because of the brewing they have similar steps there, but they're a bit different. So how was it to be the distiller in the brewery?
It was lonely. No, I joke. Martin Dickey, the co-founder of BrewDog, he actually wanted to be a distiller before he got into beer.
Oh, okay.
So he had many holidays as a child on Orkney and visited Highland Park quite a lot. And he got excited by Highland Park's whiskies and then went to study brewing and distilling in Edinburgh at Heriot-Watt University, with a view to, once he completed that course, to then go and become a distiller in Scotland. It's quite difficult to get a job in distilling in Scotland.
Oh, really?
Yeah, as a distiller, yeah. So whilst he wanted to do that immediately, he took a job as a brewer. And, the rest is history. But I've always had an advocate and a friend in him because he understands great whiskey.
Yeah, but now you moved out because you've been in the brewery and now you still work together with all the fermenting and the mashing.
It's really important that, like, for me, we utilize the expertise in that side of our business as well. We've got some phenomenally talented brewers and technical experts. So if I've got a question around, okay, I'm thinking this flavour, I'm thinking that flavour, how do you think we could best go about achieving that? Okay, well, we could do this. So it's really collaborative in that sense because I wouldn't claim to be an expert brewer. I'm definitely not an expert brewer, but those guys are. So we can collaborate to really create some awesome wash recipes to then bring them into the distillery and make some excellent whiskey.
Okay, yeah. I mean, I've never seen any still room that was as versatile as that one.
So next we have a single malt, which has been an ex-Oloroso sherry.
Ooh. Oh yeah, that is an Oloroso.
So very dark, fruit forward. You know the classic descriptions for Oloroso, but we've got subtleties in there that come from the grain and the yeast. This was an ale yeast that we used, very typical ale yeast. There was nothing massively fancy about this process or this recipe. It was pretty standard. We just didn't use any distilling yeast to do the fermentation.
What I think is very difficult now that you've tried a lot to keep track of that. When you've produced something, do you like write down the notes and how it feels and how it tastes and all of that?
Yeah, we've got that library. Yeah.
Okay. Are you going to do the blending then as well, or how are you going to approach that when you come to the final product?
We'll do the blending for sure. Yeah. So, like, for us, what's going to be cool is we'll be one of the only distilleries in Scotland that has grain and malt. So we could do a blend of the two, which will be really cool. But what we're excited about is taking all of the casks that we've got from each of the different styles, and then bringing something together which is phenomenal.
I think the blending will be a bit difficult. I would be a bit afraid of that.
No, we're really excited about it. This has got great sweetness, this whiskey. Great sweetness.
Oh, but it also has a bit of a strength, volume, bit of a, I don't say a bit of sweetness. It feels like bread.
Ready?
It feels like a bread, like a dark sourdough bread for me.
Great.
But it has also, at at the very back of my mouth. The front is a lot of dried fruits, a lot of Oloroso character, but it's a strange Oloroso. So this really feels pretty much done. When can we expect the whiskey?
Oh, you think so? That's awesome. So, not to be cliche, but you know, we're getting to a point where in the next sort of 12 to 24 months, we'll be in a position where we think we could release a small batch.
Okay.
I said to you earlier, one of our big challenges is that we have, you know, a brilliant gin, vodka, and rum that we make, and over the last 4 years, the capacity of the distillery has been, unfortunately, focused on making those. And that's why we moved into this building, because we wanted to expand our capacity, and that's our new wash still there, which is 10,000 litres. And that has allowed us to really turn the taps on making our whiskey. So going into next year, we'll be producing close to 250,000 litres of alcohol a year. So we'll have that consistency of production, which is incredibly important. But up until the point where we can unlock that, we'll be releasing small batches, probably 1,000 bottles, maybe a bit more, to just get people, you know, acquainted with us and a bit excited about what's to come.
I think I'm going to be excited about what the small batch is going to be like, and I think a lot of our viewers will also be into that.
Amazing.
Because we have a lot of malt heads out there, a lot of experts out there who are really into a bit of that experimental stuff.
Tremendous. So these two here I'd probably class as slightly experimental, right? So we were in the warehouse earlier. I took you through I explained to you one of the casks, one of the tricks that we use. So virgin oak is a really interesting cask when it comes to how it influences the flavour of your whiskey. Virgin oak means that it has never held any liquid before. It's very punchy. All the flavours are still trapped in the wood, and as soon as you put anything into that, they're all going to rush out and influence to the max the flavour.
A big additive maturation.
Yes, and you know that's fine in bourbon, which is obviously their whole industry is built on virgin oak.
Yeah.
And for us, we charred, I think this to char 4, which is a pretty high char.
I can see that.
You can. For those at home, there's a bit of charcoal in the glass.
It's unfiltered.
Yeah. And this is then before we filled it with whiskey, single malt, we put vodka in there.
Okay. Yeah.
So we put in the vodka and we rested it for, I think it was 8 months. And the vodka was like sacrificial. We sacrificed the vodka to get great whiskey. And the reason we did that is because we wanted to just take some of the big aromas or the big flavours out of that cask, because we didn't want to overpower the whiskey. So when we took the vodka out, it was this colour, and it was 8 months, right? Okay, it was so dark. You could just see all the tannins had come out of the wood, all the big flavour compounds had been removed. And then what we did was we put our whiskey in there. Now, you're still going to get a lot of the big a lot of the virgin oak flavour coming into the whiskey. Vanillas, creme brulee, coconut, etc. The ones you'd expect. But it's not as intense. Because if we just put this into fresh virgin oak, all you'd be tasting is the oak, basically.
Yeah.
I get a lot of, it's almost nuttiness, a little bit of peanut, bit of obviously whiskey lactone, coconut, but then a lot of maltiness in this as well. But this is just virgin oak. Now you would never normally release something that's only been in virgin oak, because it's a challenge in flavour profile.
You have to like it. I'm really a fan of virgin oak, but a lot of people don't like it too much. So
what I find with virgin oak is it's sometimes a bit one-dimensional. You know, so this I'm getting a good amount of caramel and burnt sugar, toffee on the palate, but there's no real, for me, there's not much deviation between the arrival and the finish. It's just kind of the same. Tastes great, but there's the complexity. So if you imagine taking this, and we will do this at some point, And we're just giving you guys an insight into some of the casks that we've got in our warehouse. This isn't stuff that we're going to launch, but if you imagine you take that and maybe you drop that a little bit of this into, you know, a vintage port cask. You know, you just build in flavour and complexity on top of this. So it's a great base, but it's not the finished product.
Yeah, I like it. So is there a term for that, for this sacrificial vodka to take out of it? So do you call it still a virgin cask, or do you call it I think it's not been that much done yet.
Should we decide what it's going to be called? No.
I don't know.
Because ex-vodka doesn't sound too sexy.
Yeah, it doesn't.
We could call it the almost virgin oak cask.
Almost virgin oak cask, yeah.
The nearly a virgin oak cask. But yeah.
I like it.
Great.
I like it. It's, but it has a nice bourbon touch to it.
As you would expect, yeah.
But not too hefty, minus the, I would say, the corn.
Exactly.
Yeah, what it's supposed to be.
I get, because for me, single malt or malt barley, in comparison to corn, it doesn't have the same level of intensity from a flavour perspective. You don't get as much intense flavour out of barley as you will corn. So bourbon you make is very challenging. But because it's going into virgin oak, it's well paired, because the intensity of the oak, the intensity of the new make, they work well together.
And you have an intense bourbon.
Exactly. But when you've got an intense oak and then not such an intense barley spirit, there's a mismatch, right?
Yeah.
So that's why we kind of brought the oak intensity down just so it was on the same level as the barley.
De-intensify the virgin oak. I think the marketing team has to decide.
Yeah, we'll put that brief to them and see what they come up with. Last but not least, we have, I think this is 5 years old. So I told you earlier on about the
this is round already.
Yeah, the challenge that we had with the rye spirit that we lautered.
Okay.
So we had 30% of the grain bill was malted rye.
Yeah.
And it took about 14 hours for this to.
Where you had the dough.
Yeah, it was like it's a mixture of like wallpaper paste and dough. So we got a very small amount of yield out of this. Because we couldn't get as much wort out as we wanted, but what we got was pretty tasty. And then what we did was we double pot distilled it, and then put it into an ex-red wine cask from France, from Burgundy.
30% rye red wine cask from Burgundy. Interesting choice.
Yeah. So red wine casks are typically quite challenging to work with. If they're not really fresh, then I struggle. So we make sure that we make the spirit, and as soon as the cask arrives, we fill.
How big is your spirit vat?
The one we've got, I think it was about, at the time, it would have been about 3,000 litres.
Okay.
So we had this spirit ready to go, the cask landed, all hands on deck, filling these casks as quick as possible, because they'd emptied them a week and a half before.
Transport.
And then transported to Scotland. And that's key. Anytime you work with wine, if I could, I'd drive all the spirit to France and fill the cask there, because they have to be as fresh as possible.
Okay.
So this is quite a.
This is unusual. It's hard to find the flavor descriptions for that, because it's a bit off from what we usually have.
Well, first of all, it's a grain whiskey.
Yeah.
But it's a pot distilled grain whiskey.
Yeah, but it's a grain whiskey made of malt.
Malt and 70% malt.
Yeah.
Malted barley, 30% malted rye. So, in terms of Scotch whiskey, where does this sit?
I don't know.
Who knows?
Off the chart.
Exactly. But it's still Scotch, which is important. So by all the definitions and all the legislation, this is still a single grain Scotch whiskey.
Yep. Slange.
Slange.
Is this really casking strength?
Yep. 16.
Oh, now it comes. Whoa, okay, this builds quite a lot. Beginning was a bit fresh, I didn't expect that, and now here comes the whole wine cask, spiciness.
The wine cask at the back is phenomenal.
But it feels like a bit of one of these hefty red wines with that hefty, spicy touch to it.
Big Burgundy wine.
Yeah, Burgundy wine. Yeah. My father used to likes that kind of wine.
I mean, for me, like that wine and also Italian big reds, Valpoliccias and Barolos, amazing.
How old is that?
I think it'll be just over 5 years.
Just over 5. Feels a bit older.
Yeah. Well, remember we've got that the maturation warehouse, which, pardon me, is entirely environmentally controlled.
So we have to talk about how warm did you put it?
So we've probably averaged about 22 degrees Celsius over the last 5 years in that space, just year round. But we take it up for periods of time, so 6 to 9 months. We'll elevate the temperature to around about that 26, 27 degrees Celsius. But then the humidity is so important. The humidity is the most important thing for maturation of any spirit. High humidity means that you will preferentially lose water. Sorry, high humidity means you'll preferentially lose ethanol or alcohol into the atmosphere, because if you've got high humidity, the water in the warehouse, the vapor content in the air is very high. So there's not much more room for water to evaporate. So you lose alcohol preferentially. But what that does, it's not great for yield, but what it does, it creates a softer spirit. Okay. So I've been to countries before where they've got maturation warehouses in very, very dry heat. So humidity's low, but it's really hot. And in those environments, you lose water out of the cask.
It's crazy. In America, in the top warehouses and in these desert or not tropical, but desert countries, they have rising ABVs, and it's crazy.
Yeah, and some of the spirit that they make is great, but for me, when you're losing water, there's a slight harshness that starts to creep into the flavour profile. A bit of heat, a bit of burn. So what we like to do is keep the humidity high, 70 to 75%, which is very unlike Scotland. And that, along with a little bit of elevated temperature, we get a beautiful maturation environment, which is perfect for our whiskey and our rum.
Really? I thought Scotland was, look outside, I thought it was like really humid.
Well, it's humid, but like when it comes to certain warehouses, they don't necessarily retain the humidity. There's sometimes, like Dunnage warehouse is very humid, right? So traditional Dunnage warehouse is extremely humid. But palletized warehouses,
Brack warehouses,
they're not
higher than.
Yeah, they're not going to be that humid. So Dunnage, great, love Dunnage. It gets a bit difficult to kind of expand that, but we've got an environment where we can control it to the exact percentage that we want in terms of humidity, and also to the specific temperature that we want. So we really are controlling the process. Really interesting.
See, that just gives me. I think I've learned a lot today. I visited, I don't know, probably 200 distilleries now. And then I thought I knew it all, but today I learned a lot.
Well, what we need to do is make sure when we come back when we have the launch and the distillery is in full swing next year, you come back, the warehouse will be probably on a heat cycle, so you can walk in there with your shirt off and talk to all of your fans.
Have some of your rum.
Exactly. Yeah, we'll make a few pina coladas. But yeah, the whole warehouse has been designed, and the whole distillery has been designed so that we are really custodians of the flavor creation at each stage, and that's something that's really important to us.
I think when you have 10 more years, you could write a big distillation encyclopedia
manual of how we did it.
Did you studied brewing and distilling?
I did for a year at Heriot Watt, but my background is in chemistry.
In chemistry,
yeah,
okay.
Master, did an undergraduate in chemistry.
But did your old professor knock on your door already?
No, there's
because I think you could do a lot of science around here
Yeah,
as
I mean,
well.
like I was a terrible student because I just wanted to speed up the process of getting into a distillery.
Okay.
So like all the other stuff that didn't involve distillation in my course, I wasn't really interested in.
Okay.
But then once I left my undergraduate, and once I graduated, I went to Heriot Watt to study brewing and distilling, and that was where I really fell in love with the process and got curious about how you can, influence flavor. Is probably the best way of describing it.
I mean, I think you have it pretty down already. I'm really excited about when you come out with the whiskey, because I'd really like to see what you then think is marketable.
Yeah, I mean, for us, we'll have, as I mentioned, we'll have the core range where people can come back to year on year and expect the same experience. But then that little 10% where we're sat in a room with the distilling team and we're going grain, yeast, distillation, casks, maturation, climate and environment. Where can we pull different tunes or flavors out of each of these processes? And we do that regularly, but we'll be doing it more as we go into next year. And next year is really important because we will have much more volume being produced.
Oh, yeah.
So the amount of experimentation we can do will be larger.
Yeah, I think the end. It's definitely not the end of the story here. I think we'll have tons to experience in the future.
For sure, 100%.
Yeah. So thank you very, very much. I've learned a lot today about how you can actually do whiskey a bit differently. And yeah, so thank you very much for watching. And stay tuned at whiskey.com and whiskey.de, because we will be launching the BrewDog whiskey as well. As you come out, we will definitely sell that. So have a look at our website. Stay tuned in our newsletters. We will definitely have them in there. And yeah, so thank you very much for watching, and see you next time.